Hi, this is Maryse Alberti, and you're listening to the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ilya, how's it going?
Hey, Ben, it's going pretty well. How about you?
Pretty awesome. I hear you're about to take a little trip.
I am. It's a driving trip, so it's not like, a big trip. It's a little driving trip. Going to the desert for a couple days.
Sounds like fun. Hey, who is on the show today?
On the show today is Maryse Alberti.
Very, very cool. I remember when our intrepid producer, Alana Cody, told me that we could get Maryse Alberti on the show. I flipped my lid. She is an amazing cinematographer with roots going back into my beloved 90s indie movie world. And I really loved talking to her. I loved her insight. And she was also very cool because her older work, both documentary and narrative, we went into so much detail that she actually came back and we did a second recording just so we could talk about her newer stuff, including stuff, little movies you might have heard of like The Wrestler and Creed. So she's awesome. Love her work. It was very exciting to get to talk to her. But before we get into that, you have a close focus segment in mind, correct?
Well, yeah, I thought maybe it deserves talking about George R.R. Martin. People who are Game of Thrones fans will definitely know who he is as the creator of basically all the original work in which Game of Thrones is based on.
It's amazing that he did that while also producing the Beatles. Am I right? Sorry. Joke for old people.
Dun, dun, dun. Anyway, here's the thing. He just signed a mid-8 figure, so we're talking like 40 to 60 million probably, reported. We don't know for sure. First look deal with HBO, and there's already multiple Game of Thrones spin-offs in development. So essentially, with the announcement of this deal, this first look deal, HBO Max is saying that they are hitching their star to the Game of Thrones wagon for the immediate future going forward. That is the tentpole in which HBO Max is going to be going after their new viewers. I think it's really interesting because all of the streaming services to some degree, well, no, I can't say all of them, but many of them have really said recently that, tentpoles is what we want. And I'm thinking specifically of like Netflix because they have a new executive for television. And forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, but Bella Bajaria, I believe is how she pronounces her name. But she said that she's very much interested in tentpole production, looking for tentpoles. Apple TV, a little bit earlier in 2020 in the summer, when Greyhound became a real breakout hit, their spokesperson said that their streaming service is looking for tentpoles. Tentpoles is what they're going to be
about.
What
does a tentpole mean? Like in the theatrical release world, a tentpole means this is the movie that everyone's going to show up and shell out money right there and then at the movie theater, at the box office, to go sit and watch in that theater. But
it's a high-profile project.
In the streaming world, though, like if I've already subscribed to Netflix and have no intention to unsubscribe from Netflix, and I feel like Netflix is almost like the Facebook of streaming services. It's got the most penetration. What does a tentpole represent to a Netflix or to a Disney Plus or to an HBO Max?
I think it's exactly the same thing as it is to the traditional motion picture studios, and it's what they're betting on. It's what they're going to promote. It's what they're going to put their resources behind. They're looking for the grand slam. They're looking for the home runs. They're not looking for base hits. They're looking for like, how are we going to attract people over to our service? How are we going to get them to sign up? How are we going to keep them subscribed? We continue to make these big spectacle things. Now, Disney is all tent poles. Basically, that if you go through Disney Plus, they do have some Disney programming, some kids stuff in there, but really their whole service looks like tent poles. They got Marvel, they got Star Wars, they got big television shows like Simpsons. That's what they're about. The only people out there who haven't really said, hey, look, we're going for tentpoles right now is Amazon, which I think the criticism of Amazon, though, is they don't exactly know which direction they're going because they do try a bunch of different things, but it's been a really good critically acclaimed season for them. Like they're getting more critical acclaim than they ever have. Hulu, of course, also, they haven't come out and said we're all about tentpoles, but I think also Hulu, Peacock, Amazon, they're all, I'm not going to say schizophrenic, but I think they're maybe still finding what if there is a thing that they're going to base themselves around. And frankly, I don't think they all need to do that. But, Paramount has said Star Trek. We're Paramount Plus, which used to be, CBS All Access. Star Trek. If it has anything to do with Star Trek.
Yeah, they canceled the Jordan Peele Twilight Zone. I was shocked about that. Like, I really thought, like, it's Jordan Peele. Give him a few seasons to figure it all out. I didn't love every episode of the first season, but I thought it was a really promising, cool new take on the Twilight Zone for sure. And I was shocked that they let it go.
I don't want to say that the nerds have inherited the streaming services, or the nerds have completely
no
taken
only
over,
HBO Max, where the nerds muscled them into creating the Snyder Cut.
Well, no, I mean, but they did. You could make the same claim for Paramount and Disney and everything else too, because really Comic-Con wasn't held last year because of the pandemic. They've now announced it's going to come back in November. They're going to do some sort of event. But really, the sort of stuff that you would see debut and launch at Comic-Con and have a bunch of fanfare and a bunch of hoopla behind it, that's sort of the tent poles for all the different streaming services right now. They're all trying to have like some sort of, and I don't want to say comic book, but I want to say like wild fantasy or science fiction or whatever it might be. They want to be able to brand themselves a thing, and I think that genre kind of does it for them. I mean, genre is kind of it's kind of become.
I'm all for it. I just I feel like what all the streaming services want is more subscriptions. That's their entire MO. And, with Netflix, I think I want to say I read an article or I heard through the grapevine or something that they started realizing when they were doing TV series that they drop a new TV series that would attract new subscriptions, and then they would cancel that show like after 2 seasons, because that 2 seasons was about all the juice that they could get out of it in terms of new subscriptions. And that is their model for how they make more money. I think everyone's ongoing subscription is definitely making them money, but as they grow and, as they're all very growth based. And I think the Snyder Cut is actually that's an interesting look into the tentpole mentality that goes into a streaming service, and almost accidentally, because it was meant to be a theatrical feature, although it's 4 hours long, but I don't think I've known so many people to have an opinion on a 4-hour-long movie ever before in my life, which means that I think that probably drove subscriptions like through the roof. And if I wasn't already subscribed to HBO Max, I might have subscribed just to check it out, because it's such a weird artifact. And I did like it. I'm not slagging on the Snyder Cut, but would I have subscribed to Disney Plus just for WandaVision or just for The Mandalorian? Or are we going to be getting, I guess, when you look at Disney Plus, there's a lot of original offerings that are tied to other properties that they have in those 2 instances anyway. And there's going to be more Star Wars related TV series, and there's already The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which is yet another MCU TV series. So, that stuff's going to chug along. I don't know. I'm just interested to see where the feature length film, i.e. like the 90-minute to maybe 2.5 hour long movie, kind of evolved through a certain phenomenology of early theatrical movies, because the early movies were all short subjects, and then, you had B pictures and newsreels and blah, blah, blah. And it all boiled down to this length that we all kind of accepted, like that's a movie, and a TV show was usually 30 minutes or an hour. And now we're sort of in this Wild West kind of thing where you can have a 4-hour-long movie where I think it is understood that you're probably going to stop it and go to the bathroom or watch half of it today and half of it tomorrow or whatever you're going to do. Like, it's not meant to be sat down and watched all in a row in one theatrical experience the way a feature film is. So like, what do we see evolving out of these streamers? And like I guess tentpole to me is terminology from the theatrical experience, not terminology from TV. And TV, you would have like sweeps, May sweeps.
Sure, that's fair. 100%. I think the real interesting discussion and question should be right now, though, is where does this leave independent film? Where does this leave independent productions? And how do they emerge?
Come on home to Vimeo, independents. Just put it on Vimeo and give it a password and people can watch it on their TV.
I think that one of these big streamers is going to figure out a way to market independence to a broader audience and really have obviously there's streamers like Sundance Channel and that sort of thing, but I feel like one of these big players is going to eventually figure out their format so that it's not just showing you the same 12 movies over and over again. Every time you log in, it's going to show you stuff that is really actually better curated for you. I had to take a picture. I'm giving it away, but my short end is going to harken back to this. And I think that actually we should actually get to the interview. We should probably get to the interview now with Maryse Alberti. We've been chatting about this for a while, and let's get to what the paying customers have come here for. Our tent pole, Maryse Alberti.
Here she is.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
All right, we are here today with amazing cinematographer. I can't even wait to get into some of her work, Maryse Alberti. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Maryse.
Thank you for inviting me, Ben.
So first and foremost, we're actually here because one of our other guests, Ron Howard, threw out a plug for you and said that we should talk to you. Not that we didn't want to talk to you ahead of time, but when Ron Howard asks you to do something, you do it. And because he was making Finding Paradise, which is what we were interviewing him about, at the same time that he was making Hillbilly Elegy with you. Hillbilly Elegy is now on Netflix for anyone to watch. Let's talk a little bit about Hillbilly Elegy, because that, it was a big book, and Ron Howard, obviously huge Oscar-winning director. You've worked with a lot of humongous directors like Darren Aronofsky and stuff like that. What was it like coming on to the project, and what were the things about it that drew you to it?
A good script. Always a good script and a good director, followed by great actors. So you can't really go wrong with that.
Yeah. So it's a period piece, but it's a very recent period piece. It's like mostly 2013, 2014. It's,
Well, it's really two time period, late 90s and 2012, with the little flashback in 1947, I think.
Yeah.
So what was interesting is that I had to treat those different time period. And from my very first conversation with Ron, I felt that, okay, we kind of had, how they say, be on the same page, or, my ideas, his ideas, we could just keep on talking. We were not far apart. We were having a good creative conversation. Had to approach those time periods. And we kept on talking. We did a lot of testing, showing a lot of things. And then in the DI, pushed those ideas even further. And sometimes you have ideas and then they kind of really shift or change, or people say yes, but no, that's too much. And this really stayed on track and moved forward. And I'm happy with what we did.
In addition to it being sort of mostly rooted in two time periods with a couple of further deep flashbacks, but it's also kind of rooted in two worlds, because you have sort of the buttoned down world of Yale, kind of the high society of Yale, contrasted against rural Ohio and Kentucky. And can you talk about how you went about visually differentiating those two worlds?
Well, I mean, if you look at the movie, you can see that most of JD childhood is shot handheld. Mm-hmm. Is very rich in terms of the color and the saturation, and his world as Yale is shot more on Steadicam and dolly, and I would say more of a normal look in terms of the saturation and the color. There's a little bit of exceptions, but that was kind of the idea, that the world of his youth as a memory is, and it was rich and crazy and insane and warm and family and love and more craziness. But his relationship with his mom and his grandmother was one of love, Mm-hmm. The family can be crazy and with a lot of drama, but still the main thing that held everybody together was a love and care for each other.
And you talked a little bit about testing, and it's something I'm always interested in how people go about even kind of setting up and structuring the testing. But can you walk me through a little bit of the process of finding the looks that you found on this particular movie? How do you set up the tests? What do you?
This one, since there was different time period, and I wanted to give it a distinct look. My process really, I've done a lot of tests with a lot of lenses, and I find that the difference in lenses is very subtle, unless you go towards old lenses, who have a lot of aberration that you can embrace. But for those, and as for a lot of tests that I've done, I set up kind of a little scene, and I ask art department, bring me some lights, bring me a sofa, bring me some drapes that you would like to test or to look at. I ask the department, just bring some looks that you want to see on film, just bring some stuff. And then I would ask a couple of stand-in, and I create, whether it's inside or outside, kind of little scene, not scene, but to people talking on the sofa, to people outside who are walking around, or just one person by a lamp, and then I start to light those, in bright daylight, in carved nighttime with just like half lit, or outside in bright sunlight. And then in the DI, I work with my colorist to just, especially for Hillbilly, to just look, how much can I push the color on that? What happened to the red? What happened to the skin tone if I saturate too much? And then in the middle of all that, I tested a couple of lenses. I just do a little bit of a mix of lens testing, but also of costumes, and so you start to have a sense of what the colors of the film could be, from every department, and a sense of what I would do, what we will do with this color in the final product. So I presented that to Ron, and he was quite happy, and that was a little bit what we talk about, but here it was concrete. We could look at it, and we move forward with that.
And I feel like, obviously Ron has been a director for a very, very long time, but a lot of his early background was acting. And to me, this is Hillbilly Elegy is very much an actor's piece. The performances are kind of at the core of what's driving the movie. When you're working on a film like this, and I know that you have a lot of documentary work in your background, but when you're working on a film like this, do you come up with an approach to lighting that kind of allows the actors to move around more, especially a movie like this too, where it's so much handheld?
Yeah, this film especially. Ron, when I interviewed with him, when I first talked with him, asked me, how do you feel with shooting two cameras all the time? And I say, well, no DP, right? Really like to shoot two cameras all the time. But if that's what you like, then that's what I will do. And I think that helped me also to keep on being in the run with him. But just to say one thing about this film, I've really learned with Ron how to shoot with two cameras. I was always a little bit reticent, I was more of a single camera person, but I've learned a lot there. And in that spirit, and the spirit in which he wanted to shoot, which is to let the actor go at it, go at each other. And it's also something I always try to do, give the actors and the director the space to do the best they can do, because the film can be lit as beautifully as I can, if the acting is no good, if then it's not a good film, and so it doesn't matter. So I really try to devise lighting where it would be lit from the outside through the windows, and then through lamps in the inside. And then I know also what you can do in the DI. You can darken this wall a little bit. You can shape that face a little bit. I've really came to really embrace the DI, and especially like in a movie like with Ron, I knew how far I could let things go without stopping to relight. But then when I felt, no, I gotta stop and relight that face at that moment. Or I would tell Ron, and he would be, yes, let's do that. So I think I gave him a lot of space and gave the actor a lot of space. But when I felt that I needed to serve the movie and to serve the actors, I needed to stop and light, then that's what we did.
A big thing that I thought about while I was watching Hillbilly Elegy, and obviously you have a great deal of narrative experience, but you also have a great deal of documentary experience.
Yeah, I have more experience and I have narrative experience, actually.
But I mean, like, and we'll get into it later, but some of that narrative experience is highly stylized, but there is sort of a documentary-ish aesthetic, specifically in the Ohio sequences in this movie, in that it feels like we're meant to feel a little bit like a fly on the wall in a lot of scenes. I always want to ask people who, like sometimes we talk to people who do only documentary, and obviously most of the DPs we talk to almost entirely do narrative. So someone like yourself who does both, I'm just always interested in how your documentary work, how it informs your narrative work and vice versa. So on Hillbilly Elegy, how did your documentary work kind of come into what you were doing here?
I think what you learn in documentary that you can bring on narrative is that to work very simply. I mean, what I love about the world of narrative, if you need like 18Ks, you can have them. I mean, on some budget, not on all of them. But you also, you're not afraid to work with, the proverbial single bulb. You learn how to work simply. You also learn, I think it becomes instinct to where is the best place to put the camera. You come in a room, you come in a space. And documentary, you don't have a lot of time to think. You don't have a lot of time, so you got to have that. You got to find where do I go hide myself in the corner to be the best place to shoot that scene. And that you can bring that to narrative film. And then I think embrace also what naturalism is. It's such, because I think I'm a little bit pegged in the naturalism. That's what I've done more than stylized. So I'm at this point where what is naturalism, and then embracing that, and that comes from documentary, because on documentary you're stuck with the gray light of today. You don't have the 18K to bring sunlight. But also had to transcend that, to push that a little bit. So I've brought that from documentary, and I'm trying to use it and to transform it in the world of narrative.
Ron had kind of mentioned to us that when he was making Frost Nixon, he would block the scenes and the DP wouldn't watch it, or the operators wouldn't watch it, and then he would have them come in and kind of find the scene. And he had a couple of shots that he knew he had to get, and other than that, he was kind of open to it. And I was wondering, watching this, if he had done anything like that as well in this, because it feels like the actors are really driving the scenes for the most part. It doesn't, like, the stuff at Yale feels, very, I guess, classically composed and shot listed and stuff. And then the stuff in Ohio feels a little out of control in a great way. Well, I was wondering if Ron had used that technique on this.
I think he did. Ron came, as you said, like in the morning, like he's funny, he takes his script and he folds it in half. And in the back of the half of one page, he has scribbled a few points. He wants to get that shot, then that close up here. And then the rest is kind of refined, Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of, on the day, finding the scene with those points that Ron wanted to get. A great experience working with Ron. I mean, as you said, he's a very accomplished filmmaker. He's a collaborator. He's respectful of the people he's working with. He is very smart to want to get ideas from the people that you've hired. He creates an ambience on the set that is focused and hardworking, but relaxed, and fun. And at the end of the film, like Glenn Close made this great speech in which she said, at this point in her life where she is, she just want to work with good people. She just want to have a good time. And she really did on this film. It was one of the top film. I have a few top film that I've worked on, all very different, with all very different director. But I had a great time on Hillbilly, and we worked 10-hour days. That was the best.
Nice. Can't complain about 10-hour days.
10-hour day.
That's very civilized to think.
I want to do that all the time.
You can come to work with a full night's sleep.
Yes, you can have a life.
Yeah, one of the stories that I once heard about Ron Howard that I think typifies what I keep hearing about him, and also in full disclosure, I worked with him on one project myself, so I can sort of back this up. But the story I heard was about Apollo 13, where he was working with the VFX team, and he has a rule. I think he calls it the 6 or half dozen rule, where if he has an idea and you have an idea and he decides that your ideas are about equivalent, he goes with your idea, knowing you're going to work your ass off on your own idea.
I don't know about that. But it was very much, very, very collaborative. And it's great to empower like that the people that you work with, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was my experience as well. Well, let's go kind of back to the beginning and kind of talk about, you've been doing this for a long time and you've worked on so many different kinds of films, but I always like to ask too, like, when was the moment that you realized cinematography was a career path?
And if I'm not mistaken,
so I never intended to be a cinematographer.
No.
I grew up in the south of France, and my grandmother, when I was 12 years old, had the first TV on the block. You know, I went to see like a little bit of theater on the TV, The Untouchables in black and white, The Rifleman, but it was so far from my consciousness. The first film that I saw in a theater was The Duel. Steven Spielberg. I don't know who took me there. I don't know how, but I always remember that black space with those people and that insane story with the truck and the car. That really
so good.
I mean, what is my luck that the first film I see in the movie theater is The Duel, and then the second film, maybe a year later, was Harold and Maude.
Oh,
Harold
wow.
and Maude. And yeah, oh, wow. So those are two films. And then when I first came to the States in 73, that kind of dates me, but in 73, I lived au pair. I came au pair in New Rochelle. And my first impression of the States were the cars were really big. And then there was a TV in every room. There was a TV in the kitchen. There was a TV in the living room. There was a TV in my room. And I watched a lot of late show and late show. Then, like in the 70s, you could watch movie like late through the night, the late show, all black and white movies. So I kind of fell in love like with movie without really knowing it. And then, you know, I took pictures. I mean, I did a lot of things. I worked as a performance artist on trapeze and in theater.
Oh, wow.
I play music. I took pictures and that kind of stuck with me. And different people put me on that path. At one point, I did a documentary directed by Stephanie Black called H2 Worker, about the Jamaican sugarcane worker who live in slave camp in Florida. They've been closed since, you know. The film H2 Worker played in Congress. It changed some of the laws of the H2 law. But the film went to Sundance and he won Best Documentary and I won Best Cinematography. And it was like, okay, I'm a cinematographer.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of, no, it's a short route. A few things happened, but that was kind of where I became a cinematography. I was on the map. So that film really, you're on the map. That's what I tell people. I've mentored a few people, and what I've always tell, you know, like now you can make movies with a phone, so you have no excuse. You can film all the time, and then so shoot, and then at some point start to choose a little bit, and that's kind of a middle of a little bit of an instinct, a nose thing, and it's a little bit of luck and fate. But because you could do a great job on the bad movie, no one is going to know about you. You do a good job on a great movie, then that's it. You're on the map. Yeah. So that's how I came about. That was the film who put me on the map, H2 Worker. It's a great film. And it's, you know, I watched it not long ago and it was like, wow, I was young. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Pretty good. It's pretty good.
I always want to know if because it's interesting to me. I do ask that question sometimes to people, like, do you go back and look at your older stuff?
Yes. Well, it was interesting when you said something about Velvet Goldmine. So I watched Velvet Goldmine not long ago. And first, I was given the opportunity by Todd. I mean, I had done a couple of movies with him before, but to do this amazing visual movie. And I wish I was given this opportunity now with what I know and who I am as a cinematographer. Because when I watch Velvet Goldmine, I see this young, talented cinematographer, but still immature. I see immaturity. I see, wow, that's great. I see I could have done that better, or I see the immaturity in the work, and that's okay, you know. But
well, I mean, I think that anyone going back and looking at their work, 20 years hence is going to feel that way. But I have to tell you that Velvet Goldmine, I saw that in the theater and it knocked me on my ass. And I think it's probably my favorite Todd Haynes movie, and just the variety of looks and the, kind of the cribbing of the structure of Citizen Kane, and then making like a Citizen Kane allegory, but with a David Bowie-esque character at the center.
Yeah, well, that's Todd Haynes, imagination and visuals.
Absolutely. But the visuals of that movie are all, it is a striking film. And I also have watched Velvet Goldmine recently. I think I watched it about a year ago. And I was shocked at how well it held up, because a lot of the, the kind of the cool, edgy indie movies of the 90s that I loved and kind of, I won't say I grew up on because I was already, in my 20s at that point. But those movies that were very influential to my thinking, a lot of times you go back and look at them and they don't quite pack the punch that they did back then. And yet I look at that and I'm like, a completely unknown Christian Bale and Ewan McGregor, kind of like right pre Star Wars, but also just like the construction and the lighting and the lensing of the visuals that you created for that movie gave it immense power.
I have to give credit to Todd. Todd is an amazing visual person, amazing artist. I have some of his drawings. Actually, he gave me some of the drawings of the storyboard that are little pieces of artwork. Yeah, but it was very, very challenging, and I was lucky to have done that movie. I wish I could find a movie like that now who gave me those opportunity.
There's another movie from around the same time as Velvet Goldmine that I was a projectionist at an art house theater when this came out, so I got to watch it a lot. And it's the Todd Solondz movie, Happiness. And Todd Solondz to me is sort of I don't know. It's not that he's reclusive, but he's just an interesting character in that, like, he kind of goes away for decades and then comes back and makes a film. And Happiness was an extremely provocative movie, to say the least.
Very difficult movie. We worked 18-hour days. It was very difficult movie. We shot a whole storyline that never made it into the film.
Really?
It was a difficult film. We had some fun, but it was a difficult film.
Well, he's such a provocateur, and he makes movies that are, that really challenge the audience and kind of push envelopes. I guess it's like from kind of that big moment in the 90s when, independent films and independent voices were kind of the pulse of culture. So a movie like that would come out and really, become a water cooler thing that people would talk about. And I understand that they were lower budget, but when you're working on a film like that, I guess if you're doing 18-hour days, then, probably your freedom is, how do I ever get home? But talk about like working on something that is kind of so out of the mainstream. A film like that, I feel like, would never get made today.
Well, we've entered this realm of political correctness, and we have to be, I think that, the pendulum swings, and now we swing too far to the other side, it will come back. But yeah, making a film now about, a pedophile and with such a sarcasm and such in a way, a non-judgmental. I have to say, as a mother, and as I remember with Todd, when the son asked the father, after he was caught, when the son asked the father, would you have fucked me? I think he asked the father those very lines, and the father says, yes. I told Todd, oh my God, man, no, you can't.
I know.
You can't say that. And, it was a really hard film to do. A lot of things happened that I won't get into this film, but there was a moment I always remember, because I love the film family. Even when you work 18-hour days and the food is bad and you're exhausted and you don't get paid a lot because it's a non-union movie. We were with Philip Seymour Hoffman when he's in his bedroom, and he jerks off, and then with the sperm, he glued the postcards on this wall. Remember that scene?
Of course I do.
Here we are. There was some young art department person with a syringe, and they're like trying to make consistency of the sperm, and it's like it's the 18-hour in the day. We all crazy, and then we all start to laugh and to giggle because everybody's so tired. But this is so absurd and out there. And I'm looking around and I said, look at that. I love making movies. I love this film family, where, we're still laughing. And that was one of those great moments.
I wanted to talk to you. There's another documentary film that you made that I mentioned earlier that I think is just like extraordinarily powerful. And I'm saying this as someone who I don't care about sports at all. But I remember going to see When We Were Kings
in the theater.
Oh, When We Were Kings, you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I can, you know what? This film, I did the interviews that link the footage that, what was his name? Leon. He shot all that footage of the fight in Africa. And then I just shot all the interview with Norman Mailer, with George Plimpton, Spike Lee, that links. So I was lucky. I met Muhammad Ali. I got a hug from him.
Oh, sweet.
That was great. But I thought you were going to talk about the Lance Armstrong film, The Armstrong Lie. Did you see that?
I would love. Yes, I did see that, and yeah, I mean, your filmography is just like outrageously extensive, and
that was because that's a sports film, and that was a great film.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong. Actually, on the Armstrong Lie, it started as a positive documentary about him, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, it started as one film. Armstrong come back. He's coming back. It's like it's gonna be his last Tour de France.
For our listeners, by the way, that's Lance Armstrong, the cyclist who won the Tour de France. I forget.
Oh yeah. And the film is called The Armstrong Lie. It was not called that from when we started. It was his comeback, and he gets, he comes in third place, and the young stud Contador beats him, and then all the shit that we all kind of knew but didn't know the extent of, all that stuff blow up, and then the movie becomes something else. And then Lance eventually says, yes, he doped to an extent. He's still an amazing athlete. And I have to say, I like the guy, I see his very dark side,
Well, that was actually a takeaway that I had from that was like, is this guy a stone cold sociopath for being able to lie so easily about what he's doing?
I don't think a stone cold sociopath, but a little bit of a sociopath. But look what he did. The money he raised for cancer awareness and what he did. I mean, he also did a lot of good.
Sure.
You can't take that away from him. He was a great athlete. He walked he still is one, he walked into a sport that was already not very clean. What makes him some kind of a sociopath is that he lied, everybody else lied. But when he was caught, he just kept on lying and going after the people who called on him. Like he was nasty, he went dark, But we spent a year with him and following him, and I was so privileged. I did a Tour de France from the inside. I mean, in a car.
Oh, wow.
From the inside. And that was great. It was great. Alex did a great job. It's a great film to watch.
Is there kind of underlying your work kind of a need to explore social issues? I mean, it sounds like
it seems that it's come to me. Yes.
Yeah.
I am into. If you look, I don't do romantic comedies. That isn't really interesting too much. I was offered a musical. I mean, could be fun, but not. Yeah, I want something. It doesn't need to revolutionize the world or change the world, but just let's talk about something real.
No, it just seems like your stuff gets into heady issues, and even like, the ones that we talked about earlier, Velvet Goldmine, which is serious eye candy and just a gorgeous, beautiful film, but it also kind of deals with real themes, but also it's a big feeling. I don't know what the budget was, but it's a big feeling movie with people who are all about to become giant movie stars, and it's very, very gay. And I feel like those kinds of movies are, especially in the 90s when that came out, it was taking a bit of a risk. It wasn't like going over territory we'd never ever seen before, in that it had a homosexual storyline, but the way that it approached it and the way it was, I also remember in the 90s, if there was a gay movie, I'm not going to name names of them, but it was always like, the gayness was what it was about. And in the case of Velvet Goldmine, it wasn't about that at all. It's just, that's what those characters were. And it was so brilliant in that way.
Yeah, it was also about the fall of an icon or the change. I mean, it's funny because when I was about to do Velvet Gourmand, I was finishing a documentary with Michael Apted about what inspires artists. Mm-hmm. And one of the people we worked with was David Bowie. I love Bowie. I was so happy. I mean, I worked with David Bowie. His cheek was against mine as we were looking through the viewfinder.
Oh, wow.
He and the Dalai Lama was my hi. But
David Bowie and the Dalai Lama together again.
And I think Todd asked Bowie for the right to some of his songs, and Bowie said no, and Todd had asked me to talk to him, which I did. And he hugged me and he said, "Don't talk to me about that, Maryse." He just gave me a big hug. He's like,
"Oh wow,
we're doing good. Don't talk to me about it." Because he was a critic of Bowie in the film. I mean,
sort of, yeah, I guess.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, look at the way Todd, after Ewan McGregor, Bowie in the suit is portrayed by this not such good-looking guy with like a wig, and from Jonathan Rhys Meyers to this guy, it was Todd's vision of what Bowie had become, and it was Todd feeling let down by Bowie. And then you could look at what do we want from our, what do we ask of our icons?
Yeah.
Well, and also, and this never occurred to me until just now, but you having shot Iggy Pop, and the Ewan McGregor character in that movie is based on Iggy Pop. Like, how much of the actual Iggy Pop informed how you went about filming him? And also,
nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
I filmed Iggy Pop at the Palladium. I have a great shot of Iggy Pop when he surfed the crowd. He was insane. He was fucking crazy. I mean, but I kind of liked him. Lou Reed was really nasty with me. And then I met, Lou Reed was really nasty. But then I met him again because I worked with a couple of artists. I worked with Laurie Anderson, and they were married, So I met Lou Reed like 20 years after. And I told Laurie what happened. He said, "Well, you can be like that." And then Lou was really cool. I made a couple of films with Laurie Anderson and one with Lou Reed. Frank Zappa drove me home in his limo. I used to live in the East Village when the East Village was not what the East Village is right now. It was really funky. And Frank Zappa drove me home, which made me a star for a few days in my neighborhood. It was very cool. So. Yeah, that was all good time. But no, that didn't inform anything.
Well, let's get into The Wrestler a little bit, because as I've said, I'm a huge Darren Aronofsky fan. I think he's one of the best indie directors that came out of the 90s. And he had made The Fountain, which is a gorgeous, beautiful film shot by Maddie Lee Batik, but I don't think it had had the impact that they had hoped for. And I almost saw The Wrestler as a comeback film for him in a weird way. In my opinion, he kind of broke form in every way from the techniques and stuff that he and Maddie Lee Batik had, honed so many times together. And one of the things was to work with a different cinematographer, you. And first, let me just ask you, what was it like kind of stepping into the role of cinematographer with somebody who had worked so closely with somebody else on all their other films?
When I first talked with Darren and first started to work with him, and I still have a lot of respect for Maddie. So he was not only stepping into shoes of a great cinematographer, but also a great friend of Darren. They've been very close. He only had worked, with Maddie. But very quickly, Darren treating me like I was his partner and collaborator, and that was really not a problem at all.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I assume it's not a problem, but I feel like you bring a different aesthetic sensibility.
Well, I mean, I think I brought it, but I think it was Darren's choice to treat this movie very differently. And maybe because they had done such a different movie with The Fountain, there was such a different approach and a lot of toys. And Darren wanted to strip down. We didn't have a video village. He and I walk around with little iPads, on the string. Yeah, he didn't want any of that. And what he told me, he wanted this movie to be all handheld. And so I was good with that. Now, after a few talks and when I started to hear him said, I'll do 14, I'll do 16, I'll do 20 take if I need to, I was thinking, maybe I should hire a great handheld operator, And then also, I'm short. I mean, I'm 5'4". And so, it would have required, and I realized when I shot tests, with Mickey, that I needed some platform shoes, a little bit of higher camera. So all came together, and I find an operator, Peter Nolan, who was excellent. I mean, as you can see, we did a great job. And Darren and I, we designed, and I really designed a lot of the shot. And Peter, of course, gave what Peter can give, and he had an amazing stamina, And what I like about when we tested, like with Darren, the concept of the all handheld, a lot of it is behind him. And one single lens. The movie is shot on one lens, except for one scene. The movie is shot all on the 12 millimeter.
Really?
Which is like the equivalent in 35 over 24, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then there's one scene where Mickey and his daughter are by the water, framed by this window, this arch in the background. And that, when we did a close-up, we shot with a 50. That was the only time where we broke the rule. We shot with the 25 in 16, the 50. And, so often you talk with director and you have like those ideas, which are great ideas, are bold ideas. And then you start to shoot and but maybe we should cover this and do that. And then that bold idea, that would give the film a style, kind of fall apart. But Darren, he committed to that, and that's what we did. And I think that's what the movie has such a great look. And of course, the movie is Mickey Rourke, is the performance of Mickey Rourke and the choice of Mickey Rourke that was
in a career renaissance of Mickey Rourke. Like Mickey Rourke had kind of been out. It was always
Darren's choice. But at the beginning, when I met Darren, there was another actor whose name I was, a lot more famous. The budget was bigger, and like into prep one day, Darren called me. He said, "Well, I got the actor that I wanted for the finance, but the budget is in half, and your salary is half too."
Oh man!
But then when he told me who was the actor, I was like, "Wow, yes! If we can wrangle him, he's the wrestler." And we did with the help of Scott Franklin, the producer, and it was great. So we committed, and that's what I wanted to talk about it. Like, we committed to a look, to a style, to an approach, and we stuck with it. And no one told us to do anything different. And that goes back a little bit to in Creed, and it was Ryan's idea to do that now with his well-known fight scene in one shot, We really rehearsed that, and the boxer and the operator Ben Semanoff did a great job. It's a little bit like doing a monologue. You learn your moves, you know. And we committed, and then they were like talk about, let's do some shot in the audience, and just in case, blah, blah, blah. And I told Ryan, no, we because if we do it, then you're going to be able to use it, or someone will make you use it. I don't know, but the shots that we did, like take 10 or take 12, were great, and let's commit with that. And we did that, and I think when you have a great idea and you execute it like great, and if you have the nerves and the support to commit to it, even if there's no way back because you don't have anything else, but it works.
I've always wanted to ask someone this question, but I've never talked to somebody who went into detail about shooting a film in this way. But like, I'll see these, it might just be a graphic that pops up every now and then on cinematography related stuff in social media. That's like a list of all the movies that were shot with one lens. And it's always interesting, but as a viewer, I'm not aware of the effect that watching a movie shot entirely on one lens, or, in the case of The Wrestler, except for one scene on one lens. Like, what is the effect that you think that has on, what's the effect that it has on you, and what is the effect that you think it has on the viewer?
Well, first, it's good that you're not aware, because, the point is not to make you aware of that, but to make you feel an emotion, In that case, because the lens is a wide lens, like the 12 in 16, it's fairly wide. And we had to be careful, in close up with the actors. There's a line of a few inches where if you get too close, then it distorts and then you start to see the lens. But I think what it made us do in that case with that lens, you were always in with the character. When you shoot a close-up with a 65 or 100 millimeter lens, it's a different feel than if you shoot that close-up with a 40 or 32 lens. I'm talking in 35 now, because if you shoot that close-up with a wider lens, the camera has to be close to the actor. So emotionally, it's a different emotion that you feel as a viewer. You feel that you are close to them, that you are in with them.
Do you make that decision and say, like, we're only rolling with the 12 mil for the whole show? Or do you have like other lenses just in case you're screwed in a scene and the only way out of it?
I don't remember, but I'm sure we had very few other lenses. We had the 50, obviously, and I don't think we planned. But we tested different lenses. I walked around the street of Brooklyn, like with Mickey, and we tested different lenses, and we stuck with that one. But I think it was Darren's commitment to use one lens and all handheld.
And that movie also, I always think that finding a very naturalistic look, where it just feels like we're dropped into a real location. That movie has that look and that feel, but I always feel like that takes just as much work to accomplish as any other look.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Like, for example, when you are in his trailer, when we are with Mickey in his trailer, it feels very naturalistic. It feels very much like this sad gray day in the trailer. There's a bunch of 18K outside and bounce and all kind of stuff like that. So it took a little bit of work to make that look. Now, when you are in some of the venue, like when he starts to sell, I think when they go and he starts to sell his signature, in that very sad room, I did very, very little, because I said, wow, I don't need to do anything to create that mood that I'm seeing. I love that mood. This is the mood. This tells the story. So I don't do anything, or very, very little. Mm-hmm. We went to look at a lot of wrestling fights, and so you have a sense of the space. And then I started to learn how a ring is lit, which I brought a little bit to Creed, But a lot of the venue, we also shot those venues with real crowd. We went in there, and then in between round of a real match, we would bring in Mickey. We had first announced to the crowd, and we're making this movie, don't look in the camera, we're going to interrupt your game. And most crowd were great, except the one in Philadelphia, where it was like a really hardcore place. People are nuts. Where, like the guy is stapled his forehead, where people hit each other with barbed wire's bat. This is all real. The crowd was all real and thirsty for blood, literally, You had some young women on the side that were screaming, kill him, kill the fuck out of him,
Real.
And then so we had announced to the crowd, okay, so in between bouts of real fight, we're going to come in, because Mickey didn't want to do like a whole fight. He could not remember the choreography of the whole fight. Mm-hmm. So we will go in. And I remember that sometimes I was in the ring, and I'm short, I'm small. I was all dressed in black with a cap, and we shot with two cameras. So I had one camera. And as soon as we went in the ring, the crowd was chanting, Hollywood, get the fuck out. Hollywood, get the fuck out. And I'm thinking something's going to fly on my head. Somebody's going to throw something, but we made it, And so it all feels real because it is.
That's amazing. Well, those scenes, like all the wrestling scenes, and that feel like what they were. Like, it didn't feel like a room full of paid extras who were being directed. It felt like people.
They were not. They were real people. They were the crowd. They were the crowd. Yeah. And all those wrestlers, all those guys were real wrestlers.
Yeah.
No, that authenticity really shines through.
And Mickey, sort of, because of who he is, it fit right in, He really fit right in. It was so great. I mean, we had to wrangle him, Me and Darren
really?
kind of, like Scott Franklin, the producer, had to wake him up in the morning, and sometime, it was like sometime I had to go and Mickey and put my hand in front of his face and say, "Don't even go there with me, Mickey," But it was done all in play, but
That's
he
funny.
delivered, man. He delivered. And Darren, I talked to him before, I'm putting a lot of things in this movie. You have to promise me that you're going to show up, and he did. He really did.
Did you feel after doing The Wrestler and then Creed that maybe you'd be typecast and that you'd only be doing boxing and fighting movies?
Only grappling would be next.
Grappling,
no,
yes.
but Men in Tights. And I'm strong,
Yeah.
on bicycle.
And when we were kings.
I was asked to do Creed 2 because I had a great time with the producer. We was happy. And I felt, you know what? Ryan is not doing it. I've done it. I don't need to do it again. Let's do something else.
When you were doing Creed, because it reinvents the Rocky franchise.
Yes, it does. It really, and in such a great. But that's Ryan who wrote that script.
But did you, as a visual reference, look back at any of the Rocky movies, or were you
we
only
did,
looking
but we look back more to what not to do. Me and Ryan, we would check each other out. Like the film reference that Ryan had was The Wrestler.
Well,
it was The Wrestler.
How you got the gig.
So I knew that one. Yes, I got it. It was The Wrestler and The Prophet. Un Prophète, that French movie, The Prophet, yeah. Jacques Arnaud. So we looked at that. But when we looked at some of the Rockies movie, we would check each other out. And do you like this color? Do you like this? Do you? No. Well, not really. Well, me neither. And taking the good thing, like the iconic thing of the steps and, and things like that. But yeah, he was reinventing. The first Rocky is really great.
It is.
After that, one could argue,
Yeah.
But yeah, and Michael B. Jordan is such a doll, I loved him. It's great. Great experience. Great crew, great experience.
So let's move to maybe a slightly less happy thing. We've just learned of the passing of the amazing, legendary director Michael Apted, with whom you had worked. What can you say about working with him? I mean, he was a legendary documentarian doing the 7 Up films, and then also he shot numerous. He's sort of like, in a sense, a lot like you. He worked in documentary and narrative as well.
So I met Michael. I was quite young. I think I met Michael like 35 years ago or 30 years ago. And I interviewed with him for a film called Incident at Oglala about the AIM movement, the case of Leonard Peltier. And Michael was British, although he lived in LA. He was very British, and his humor, it was very, very funny, but with a very dry, sarcastic sense of humor. And I love that about him. He was very smart, very, very smart. The last thing I did with Michael was a long form commercial called Blinding the Light. And he was probably at that time 70 years old. We went to Japan, and I was really impressed how his brain could take all the information that we were given and process it so fast, and very smart, hardworking, committed, that Michael, I was with him in the jungle of Madagascar. He would pick up the tripod and climb with us. I did a movie on the World Cup. I did a film on the student of Tiananmen Square, where we were going from safe house to safe house in Beijing to talk to the student of Tiananmen Square who had escaped the square. That was like 30 years, or 28 years ago. Yeah. And always a great collaborator. I mean, you had to be sharp, you had to be on top, you had to be focused. He didn't have a lot of patience, but he took me on many, many adventures. And he became, when you start to hang out, the world of documentary is so small, you're such a small crew, that you get close to people in a way that you might not get on a movie that has a crew of 50 or 100 people, So I got close to Michael. We share a lot of our life. Is going through a couple of wives, me having a baby, and he really supported that when we did Tiananmen Square. I was pregnant when we started, and then when baby was born, we had the clearance to go to Beijing and to go to Taiwan to do some recreation, and I didn't want to go because I didn't want to leave like my baby. And Michael said, "Well, bring the baby." My husband came, we took the baby with us. So he was a friend. He was a friend. He was a filmmaker.
I'm so sorry to hear about that loss.
That I respected and loved working with, and he was a friend.
Yeah, he has an amazing body of work, and I feel like his 7 Up movies are, like associated.
That was amazing. I remember that I saw 28 Up. I didn't know who he was. I never met him, but I remember I saw it with friends, and we went out to dinner, and man, we had amazing conversation. Mm-hmm. And then 6 months later, I got a call to interview with Michael Apted. It was like, wow, yes. And then I got the job.
Well, I think that's an amazing place for us to leave it. Again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we go, where can people find your work online? Obviously, go onto any streaming service and tons of your work is there. But do you have a website or something that
I make art always, and I have photographic shows, and I don't have a website, which is to the chagrin of my dealer, but I'm going to do one. So eventually I will have one, but my agent has, a site where my work is, that's easy to find. And eventually I will have a website of my own work.
Well, I would just encourage anyone to just look you up on IMDb, and if you are a lover of great films.
IMDb I don't really like, because there's I've never taken the time to clean it up. There's all kind of stuff. Some films I don't know what that is, and I think it's a bit of a mess. I think my IMDb is a little bit of a mess. But if anybody is at all interested, to look at the website from That Nerd Dispoto, they have a pretty good website that represents my work.
All right, cool. We will put a link to that in the show notes, and I would encourage anyone to check that out. And again, thank you so much for making the time to talk to us. Your work is just amazing. We're huge fans, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
So that was Maryse Alberti. Everybody go check out Hillbilly Elegy, for God's sakes, and go dip into her filmography. I'm still in love with Velvet Goldmine. I probably could have just done an hour and a half on Velvet Goldmine, because I love that movie, and I love the way it looks so much.
Yeah, it was a great interview. I'm so glad that she could come on the show.
And now, short ends.
All right, so Ben, it is that time once again. It seems like only yesterday we were doing this. I guess it was a week ago.
It wasn't quite a week ago. We're doing it a little early this week.
That's right. It is a little early. So what is your short end this week? What do you got going on?
All right. So I want to talk about NFTs, which is...
NFTs. Non-fungible tokens.
Non-fungible tokens. And I want to bring it up mostly to rub it in everyone's nose that I was right. And I want to say it was probably about 3 years ago, where I don't even remember what episode it was on, or we could pull it up. But I remember saying, I don't understand why, in a world where we could have blockchain to track money, which is it's a collective delusion. I hate to burst everybody's bubble. Money doesn't exist, doesn't have inherent value in and of itself. It's a thing we've all decided and made up. So, with cryptocurrency, they came up with this blockchain technique. I won't even really call it a technology. I guess it doesn't sound like it's a super high-tech technology. And that's the beauty of it. But if I have a Bitcoin, or if I have a certain amount of Bitcoin and I give it to you, I can't make a duplicate copy and keep it for myself. It is the blockchain is tracking it. And I was like, if we can track money that doesn't exist, why couldn't we track digital files of movies and music? When harkening back in the days when you would own a CD or a DVD that would have the movie on it, and then if I sell it to you, I don't get to have it anymore because I sold it to you. I mean, yeah. And so NFTs have come along, and that is exactly what an NFT does. And there was, I don't need to get into all the details, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but a piece of digital artwork sold for $20 million or something ridiculous a few weeks ago, and it was sold as an NFT. And the question I have about NFTs now, as opposed to like when in the days when DVDs and CDs were kind of going away, the days of owning your own media were basically just crumbling in our hands. And so I wonder if the NFT technology, if it's too late to save owning your own media. You know what I mean?
Well, there is one small bit that you're missing with this discussion of NFT, is that NFT is not actually owning the media, the electronic digital media, so much as it is owning a certificate of authenticity that says that you are the owner of this product or this thing. It isn't necessarily helping you on the replication part of it, because there's a lot of digital art and digital media and stuff out there. It can still absolutely be copied and duplicated, but it's claiming that then you are the one who actually owns what that is. Like, you've seen the GIF of the rainbow cat that sold for $650,000. That doesn't mean that everyone out there now who has that GIF suddenly now owes money to this person. That person owns really the certificate of authenticity for that digital file.
Yeah.
And man, it is a slippery slope right now. And I had someone essentially describe the current market of NFTs out there as rich people flexing. That's I don't know if you've heard that, but they were like, hey, there's a lot of furious bidding to snatch up some of these things. And when that happens, there's a theory working out there called the greater fool theory. Something has value as long as there's always a greater fool to come along and say it's worth more. NFTs might be that, and it already to some extent looks like that's the case. But I think it is all still too early to tell. I think that there is a way that it can, or something like it, do exactly what you said before. And I got to give you credit. The first time I heard of NFT, I was like, that's exactly what Ben said. That is exactly what Ben said in Short Ends on the show years ago. And here this is. But it's slightly different, and I hope it gets there. So
yeah. I mean, I guess that's my big question is, could it get there? Like, yeah, I understand that right now it's mostly people dealing in art. Like, the art world has always been the weird play space of the over-rich buying things with perceived value. But I do wonder if it could trickle down to us plebes, where I could own a movie or I could own a CD. I always feel like with the digital world that we're in, which I benefit from, we all benefit from it, you can have access to any piece of media you want until it's not there, until the movie that I want to watch on Shudder gets dropped on Shudder this month because that their license agreement, or and it happens on Netflix, it happens on HBO Max, it happens everywhere. And so I start to wonder the ownership mentality where I own a DVD, I own a piece of media. I'm the media collector. Like, none of us need to be media collectors now because we just kind of have these giant aggregator creatures out there that we subscribe to, and we can get mostly what we want. And again, until it's not there. I bring up Shudder because I love the John Carpenter movie Prince of Darkness, and it was on there for a while, and I wanted to watch it again for some reason some time ago, and I was like, oh man, I could really watch Prince of Darkness right now, and it wasn't on Shudder anymore. And I was like, what? If I had a Blu-ray of Prince of Darkness, just pop the Blu-ray in. But I do think that media collecting in and of itself is kind of a lost thing, because it's really been not the end of it hasn't been like that long, but I'd say it's probably been about 10, 12 years since, you remember going into like a Tower Records or a Virgin Megastore, or even a Barnes & Noble, and there'd be a huge VHS, there'd be a huge DVD section, there'd be a huge CD section, and you could kind of poke through it. Or, if you were going to the movie theater, most movie theaters were right near a record store, and you'd go there and kind of think about CDs you might buy, or magazines, or movies. And now, rightfully in a lot of ways, and also I feel like something is a little lost, that like none of that culture exists anymore. We're just kind of all, picking over the collective shit pile of every movie ever made. And if you don't believe me, go on Amazon Prime and look at like the weird motley assortment where they're like, oh, you liked this movie? And then they'll like line up like 20 weird ass movies that don't belong in any kind of category together. Anyway, I'm just interested to see if NFTs if the idea sticks around, and if it does, do we start to buy, sell, and trade digital assets like music, like movies?
It's a great question. It's too deep of a thought, actually, for where we can go with this. I hope it's true. I think we will get there.
I hope so.
I just don't know exactly how I don't know what that world looks like. Just
yeah,
yet,
I know. We've all adjusted to the world that we're in now, and thanks to a giant economic recession and the rising of piracy and the rising of things like YouTube and a million other things that kind of got us off of media collecting and got us into the streaming world in general. The streaming world protects people from piracy just because it disincentivizes it, really. Anyway, so what is your short end, Ilya?
My short end is a new Netflix movie called Bad Trip. And Bad Trip is, it's produced by a tremendous amount of talent, including Ruben Fleischer, friend of the show. And it stars Eric Andre. And in very many ways, it feels kind of like an offshoot of the Eric Andre show, if you've ever seen that. I know I've talked about it on the show. It is a surreal, juvenile, wild sort of ride. And they have a bunch of other producers and people who are involved in it who have been in Bad Trip, that is, who have been involved in things like Jackass and different sorts of like reality sorts of television. And the movie does a really good job of blending together prank style shows inside of a framework of a feature film. And it's a rather simple story about love, essentially, in the most fractured sort of way. But really, the point of it is that part of the enjoyment from this is the outrageous humor, which is what you might expect from all different types of movies. But because this is all taking place, this whole feature film is shot in public with the general public sort of playing themselves, like unaware of what's going on. It very much has a Borat sort of feel to it, but all the cameras are hidden. So you get these hidden cameras that they use, and they use a lot of the same techniques, and you see a little bit in sort of the credits. You almost get this sort of like Cannonball Run sort of like outtake thing where you see behind the scenes. And I didn't want to like the movie as much as I did. I mean, I didn't want to admit that I was so enjoying it, but I really, really enjoyed this, and I have to highly recommend it. But as I was starting to blow in the in the close focus, this movie is not really like anything else that I can think of, except for maybe Borat. And it's certainly not like anything else on Netflix. But when the movie ends, and this is really interesting, the Netflix streaming service decided to recommend, they're like, oh, if you watch this, here's all the other things that you will like, which include like a bunch of TV 14 and TV like Youth 7 rated things that are like kids programming. And I do not understand how this sort of like hard R sort of or TV MA that you would put on something that's like label on something like this, how you would possibly make the connection then to children's programming. But it completely boggles the mind as to what Netflix is thinking. But Netflix really doesn't know who I am or what I just watched, and clearly like people who watch this probably didn't actually like that. So that to me is,
do you think it might just have to do with your kids watching stuff on Netflix on your Netflix?
Maybe, but that's really bad that it says like, oh, you finished this, now watch that. That's like the two things don't seem to be related. And frankly, my kids have their own profile, so all the kids program gets watched through that.
Well, there goes that theory.
So
yeah, my other theory is just that like a bunch of stoners sitting around eating Cheetos watching weird kids shows like My Little Pony.
Yeah, there's graphic depictions of like bestiality and all kinds of things in this that is like, you just do not you like, there's no way that, I mean, totally appropriate like absurdist humor for adults. And I do have to give credit to Katao Sakurai, who's the director of this, who also has been working with Eric Andre for, it looks like, a very long period of time with the Eric Andre show. If you are familiar with that show and familiar with sort of like the style and genre of what's going on, even though it's not that show, you'll really like this. It is lowbrow humor at its best.
That's fun. Did you ever see, it's like a really old web series from probably over 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, called Ikea Heights?
I heard about Ikea Heights. Yeah.
I think it's still out there. And it was a show that, to my knowledge, was either a weird publicity stunt for Ikea or shot in Ikeas without the knowledge of Ikea. But the filmmakers realized like there are all these sets. So you've got like a bedroom and a kitchen and whatever. And they would like stage scenes that would happen in these rooms and come up with characters and have weird flashbacks. And it was all shot inside an Ikea. I thought it was very clever. this makes me think of that.
I knew someone who worked on one of those. I don't know if it was Ikea Heights or something else, but it starred. It had a legitimate, like, celebrity.
I don't think Ikea Heights had anyone legitimate.
Well, there was one that did.
You would see like lots of, not just a customer or two, but just people walking around in the background looking at armoires and shit.
It's I think that adds to the humor. I think there's a level of like, what? And it's Tiffany Haddish is in Bad Trip, and she's totally made up so she doesn't look like her normal, glamorous self. And she is like a bulldozer when she rolls into these scenes, like in public, with like no fear, playing this, just like hardcore gangster, convicted, teardrop tattooed prison escapee, and people like look at her like, what the hell's going on? And she just like shows up into these scenes and just like destroys everyone's like preconceptions of what's about to happen, and then kind of disappears and does this over and over and over again. And it's wonderful, and it's amazing to me too, though, that because like, once you know it's her, you can definitely see it, but they do a great job with the makeup. But at no point do you actually see anyone going like, oh, I know who Eric Andre is, or I know who Tiffany Haddish is, or I know who Lil Ray Howery is, or any of the other people who are in this. And because of that, it just completely works. And as you would suspect, sometimes it doesn't exactly work, or they did multiple takes of it. And in the credits, you get to see some of these like alternate takes and alternate cast and alternate things that they had to do, because frankly, a portion of the show is just that, whoever they got to also be in that scene, which maybe they had some sort of trumped up reason to have like a plumber show up to someone's house or something to be the victim of a prank.
Shows like that, since I've lived in LA, have always made me, especially with the rise of reality television, which happened shortly after I moved here, always make me wonder if I'm on a prank show, if something really weird is happening. I remember once I was at the worst seafood restaurant I've ever been to in my life. And it was in a part of town that I don't usually go to. I think it was near Marina Del Rey, and it was just in a storefront. Like you could have loaded it in that day. And the waiter was so weird, and everything was so odd. I'm like, am I on? Is this a prank show? And then I decided to be as unfunny as humanly possible, and not in any way entertaining, and just roll with whatever weirdness this guy did, just in case, because I didn't want to be on their stupid show, whatever it was. I just wanted, some red snapper. Anyway.
Well, what's really funny is, I don't know if you happen to hear Sacha Baron Cohen's acceptance speech for his WGA award, where he basically said that the public was full of surprises for the Borat subsequent movie film, and they never knew what they were going to get, except for Rudy Giuliani, who gave them exactly what they were expecting.
Oof. And more.
Yeah, that was good.
Awful.
Well, anyway, Ben, I think that just about does it. Where can people find you?
Please go to benrockonline.com, and you can find all my social media connections there. You can watch my reel, see some of my work, link to the Video Palace podcast, some other crap that I've done, all kinds of cool crap. I don't mean to call my stuff crap. I'm very proud of all of it. I'm just saying, go there, watch some of my crap. That's all I'm saying.
I'll go there and watch some of your crap.
How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, sponsor of the show. We sell equipment. It's amazing how often people tell me that they don't realize that Hot Rod Cameras sells things. So I figure I should just make it clear here. If you're still listening to the show and you run a company, then you have like an in-house video production department, or you're a government, or basically anything, we sell to everybody, from the U.S. Army to all kinds of, like, to a major $1 billion toy company that produces all their commercials in house, and individuals, all like film students. We get people all over the country.
I just recommended you, and I told him to call you to my friend Carlos, who's in the market to get like the newest, greatest red camera and a whole set of lenses. And I was like, and he was asking me questions about what I thought of the lenses. And I'm like, honestly, I am not the authority on which lenses are good and which lenses aren't good. And I would say test a bunch of them and see which ones you like the most. But I also said, call Ilya, because he will give you the straight dope on all of it, and he will make sure that you don't get ripped off. And then, theoretically buy it from him too. Although he's not in California, so I don't know if that.
Well, that means he doesn't pay any sales tax. That means if he buys something from me, there's no sales tax for him, because Hot Rod Cameras only exist in California. So if you are outside of this state, or if you are some other part of the world and you do want to buy something, we don't have to charge you any. Or actually, I shouldn't even say charge. Collect. We don't get to keep that money. We just collect it on behalf of our government. So that's really
Carlos, if you're listening to this, and I know you might be, call Ilya.
Yeah, I'll help you out. I am actually an authority, so I can help you with that.
Not just you, like everyone at your company knows so much about the gear that you guys sell, and you take pride in not ripping people off and not, like finding the solution that meets their needs as economically as possible.
No, we're pretty much an outlier because we don't have anyone on commission, not a single person. In fact, I like to joke and say we don't even have a sales department, but really, I guess technically that is what they're doing. But really, their whole my team is incredibly technically competent and not motivated to sell you as much as possible, which is basically different from every other shop out there. So that's kind of that. I think that actually is what makes us great in a lot of regards, is that people call up and we're not trying to shove things down their throat or just trying to get them to buy the most expensive thing. We really have long-term relationships and we want to make sure that people get what they need. So this has turned into a impromptu and unexpected commercial for Hot Rod Cameras, but
infomercial. I'd call it
infomercial.
It's an infomercial. It's chock-a-block with information.
It is. Look at all that information we just spewed out there.
Anyway, so Ilya, who do we need to thank this week?
Let's thank Alana Cody. Alana Cody, who's going to listen to this, and she's like going to be going, "Wow, it took a long time to get to my thank you." And then she's going to tell Ben Katz to cut out everything and get to that thank you.
I don't mean
first.
to be like this, but she really does get paid in thank yous, just like you and me.
That's pretty much it. Yeah. The big money, the big thank you. So, let's thank Kays. Kays and I are working on a little thing together, so it should be fun.
I didn't know you and Kays were working on a thing.
It just happened yesterday. So,
and the thing about you and Kays working on a thing is you said that, and I'm like, you could be making a giant CGI UFO. You could be setting up your Resolve suite in your screening room and tweaking it out and making sure all the colors are all perfect and the projector is calibrated properly. You could be doing a camera shootout and comparing several different cameras. I don't even know what the hell you and Kays could be doing because Kays does fucking everything.
Well, it involves music. And,
oh my God. and that's the one thing that Kays, like when he moved to LA, he was a composer. And now I'm assuming that, when you first brought it up, I was like, oh, well, it's gotta be something visual. Cause he's like, he's a visual everything, but of course he's also an amazing composer. He composed all the music you heard in this episode.
There's a visual component to it too, but you know what? Kays is not going to hear this. He's not going to listen to it. So I can say whatever I want now.
Well, go to musicbykays.com anyway and harass him.
And let's thank Ben Katz. Ben Katz, I didn't make it easy for you on this episode. I hope that we end up sounding halfway competent.
I think we sound okay.
Correct.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think I hope so.
I'm a little punchy, but
Ben will make sure we do.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, and we will see you next week for another exciting episode of the Cinematography Podcast.
Thanks for listening.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.